What if the freedom you defend was the very thing that enslaved you? They told you that you were free, free to choose your path, free to chase your dreams, free to build your life. But every morning, your alarm rings not out of liberty, but out of obligation. You walk through cities lit by screens, governed by codes, and driven by debts. You work not for passion, but survival. You scroll not for truth, but distraction. You vote, you speak, you post, yet something inside you knows. None of it feels like freedom. What if freedom has been stolen, wrapped in consumer plastic, and sold back to you at interest? What if the system doesn't want your liberation? It only wants your obedience dressed as choice. And what if someone saw this long before we did? Not a prophet in robes, but a man in exile, a thinker, a rebel, a heretic of capitalism. His name was Karl Marx. Karl Marx was not merely an economist or political theorist. He was a surgeon of civilization, unafraid to cut deep into its myths. Born in 1818 in Germany, Marx spent most of his life in poverty and exile. Yet his mind wandered freely through the structures that governed empires and factories alike. He wrote of class, of capital, of labor and power. But at the heart of his work lies a single question. What does it mean to be truly free in a world built on profit? To Marx, the modern world was not a marketplace. It was a machine that chews through time, through bodies, through dreams. It promised liberty, but delivered labor. It spoke of choice, but offered chains. He watched as workers sold their time, hour by hour, day by day, for wages just enough to stay alive, so they could come back tomorrow and do it all over again. He saw how comfort sedated resistance, how illusions pacified the oppressed, how capitalism didn't need to force obedience, because it could manufacture desire. Now, nearly 2 centuries later, his ghost still lingers, not in dusty books, but in warehouses filled with underpaid labor, in phones that track your thoughts, in debt that follows you like a shadow. Marx wasn't just writing about his time. He was writing about ours. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. Karl Marx spoke of alienation, a quiet spiritual wound that festers in the heart of the modern worker. In the 19th century, it meant factory hands, machines, soot-covered men separated from the value of their labor. But today, alienation wears new skin. It hides behind glowing screens and flexible schedules. It whispers through productivity apps. You're free to hustle while draining your soul in silence. You no longer produce with your hands. You curate, optimize. In today's world, that estrangement is digital, intimate, and endless. You stare into a laptop, typing ideas you don't believe in, for brands you'll never use, to please clients you'll never meet. You make slides. You send emails. You attend meetings. And deep down you wonder, is this all there is? You feel productive, but not alive. You are connected to the world, and yet you feel unseen. That is alienation, not in theory, but in experience. And it's not just about work. Even in your so-called leisure, alienation follows you. You scroll endlessly through content designed to pacify, not to inspire. You compare your life to illusions. You laugh at memes and viral clips, while your heart grows numb. You're told you're free to choose. But every choice is prepackaged, curated, algorithm approved. You don't choose what to desire. The system trains you. Desire itself has been automated. You become a ghost in your own body, a user in someone else's world, a consumer, not a creator. And when you try to break free, to write, to build, to dream, you feel paralyzed. Because the system never taught you how to live, only how to perform. Marx described this as the alienation of man from his own essence. But what if that freedom is no longer real, just rebranded? In Marx's time, slavery and serfdom were visible. Chains were iron. Authority wore a crown. But modernity is more clever. It sells you your chains and calls them choices. You think you're free because you can choose between an iPhone or a Samsung, between Netflix or Hulu, between Adidas or Nike. But these are not real choices. They are illusions within the same cage. This is not freedom. This is a shopping mall with invisible walls. Karl Marx predicted this too, what he called commodity fetishism. A society where people worship objects, not for what they are, but for what they represent. Shoes aren't shoes. They are status. Cars aren't transport. They are self-worth. Your clothes, your home, your lifestyle, all purchased to simulate identity in a world where identity has no roots. In the consumer prison, your freedom is measured by your purchasing power. You are not a citizen. You are a target demographic. You are not a soul. You are a data point. And worst of all, you are trained to love it. You post your vacations, your meals, your moments, offering your life as advertisement. You become both product and promoter, willingly enslaved by the need to be seen, liked, validated. This is capitalism's cruelest trick. It makes you work for your cage, defend it as freedom, and ridicule anyone who questions its design. We've been taught that freedom means more choices. But when every choice is preconditioned by marketing, manipulated by trends, and limited by income, where is the freedom? You can vote every 4 years, but the real power is in boardrooms you'll never enter. You can speak online, but only if the algorithm finds your voice engaging. You can work hard, but the ladder you climb was built on a rigged floor. You are free, as long as you play along. Marx once said, "The ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas." Today, those ideas are not forced upon you. They are streamed into your feed 24/7. You don't resist them because they entertain you. You don't question them because they comfort you. You don't even notice them because you live inside them. So ask yourself, are you living or consuming? Are you free or just better marketed to? Karl Marx believed that history was a story of conflict, a war not of weapons, but of classes. In his time, it was the bourgeoisie, the owners of capital, versus the proletariat, the workers. But today, the battlefield has shifted and the lines are no longer clear. There are no factories filled with smoke. There are no coal-stained hands or picket lines on every corner. Instead, there are open-plan offices, remote logins, and gig economy platforms. Instead of chains, we wear lanyards. Instead of overseers, we have team leaders. The tools of exploitation have evolved, but the essence remains unchanged. You still trade your time for survival. You still live paycheck to paycheck, rent to rent, debt to debt. The classes haven't disappeared. They've just learned how to hide. This is class struggle 2.0. Silent, digital, polished, brutal. The wealthy now don't just own land. They own infrastructure. They own your internet, your water, your medication, your entertainment. They own the platforms on which you speak, the banks where you borrow, the companies that mine your data while offering free services. You cannot see your oppressor because now it is the system itself. The top 1% hold more wealth than 99% combined. And yet, we call this progress. We call it innovation. We call it the free market. But freedom for whom? For the billionaire who pays no taxes while millions skip meals? For the landlord who raises rent while tenants work 2 jobs? For the corporation that automates jobs, then sells courses to res-kill the unemployed? This is not evolution. It is escalation. The working class hasn't disappeared. It's just been renamed. Gig workers, creators, freelancers, dream chasers. These titles sound empowering, but underneath, they mask the same old reality. No benefits, no protection, no future. Marx warned that the ruling class would do everything it could to protect its power. Today, it does so not with violence, but with distraction. They give you content to numb you. They give you slogans to divide you. They give you hope to sedate you. And if that fails, they give you debt to keep you running in circles, too tired to revolt. Rebellion is no longer silenced by bullets. It is drowned in entertainment. Dissent is no longer imprisoned. It is shadow banned and ignored. You are not losing a war. You are losing a war you were never told you were in. So ask yourself, if you cannot name your enemy, how will you ever be free? The greatest trick power ever pulled was convincing us that it doesn't exist. Karl Marx warned of a dangerous illusion, false consciousness, a state where the oppressed unknowingly defend the system that exploits them. They wear the chains proudly. They confuse obedience with virtue. They call struggle grit and exploitation opportunity. Look around. People celebrate overwork. They post their exhaustion like trophies. They glamorize the grind while their spirits quietly decay. They believe if they suffer enough, they'll make it. They worship billionaires like saints. They blame the poor for being poor, not the system that stacked the game against them. This isn't just ignorance. It's programming. From childhood, we're taught to obey, not to question, to memorize, not to understand. to chase grades, degrees, jobs, without ever asking why. We are told that those at the top earned everything, that anyone can succeed if they just work hard enough. But what about those born already drowning in debt? What about those whose labor feeds empires but can't afford rent? The truth is, we are conditioned to protect the very system that feeds on us. It tells us to dream, but only within its limits. It tells us to speak, but only what's appropriate. It tells us to be ourselves, so long as it sells. And when someone questions this, they are mocked, labeled as lazy, dismissed as bitter. This is how power survives, not by silencing every voice, but by turning the masses against the few who dare to speak. We are more afraid of discomfort than deception. We are more loyal to comfort than to truth. Psychologists call this system justification. The brain's need to believe the world is fair, even when it's clearly not. Because the alternative, that we've been lied to, is too painful to face. But Marx knew the cost of waking up. He knew that to see clearly is to suffer. To break the illusion is to feel lost before becoming free. And so, most people choose the illusion. They work, sleep, scroll, consume, repeat, and call it life. But deep down, something aches. A silent scream inside the soul that whispers, there must be more than this. And there is. But it begins with truth. And truth, as Marx understood, is always uncomfortable. So ask yourself, what lies have you mistaken for freedom? And are you brave enough to unlearn them? Look around you. We live in a world where everyone is talking, tweeting, posting, streaming, sharing. A world where opinions fly faster than thoughts, and truth is measured in likes. But what if this endless noise isn't freedom? What if it's control wearing a digital mask? Karl Marx warned that ideology is most dangerous when it feels invisible. Today, our ideology lives in our pockets. It scrolls endlessly. It sings in catchy sounds, dances on screens, and follows us like a shadow. The modern world doesn't need to silence you. It only needs to distract you. Distraction has replaced dissent. Convenience has replaced courage. Speed has replaced depth. You don't need a dictator when you have an algorithm. Social media platforms don't care what you believe, only that you stay engaged. Outrage sells. Simplicity wins. Truth? It's too slow, too messy, too quiet to trend. You are told you have a voice. But the moment you speak something difficult, something real, the algorithm buries it. It rewards emotion over reason, impulse over thought, conformity over complexity. Marx's prophecy of the commodification of consciousness is here. You don't just consume content. You are the content. Your time, your clicks, your attention, harvested, sold, recycled. You are not the user. You are the product. And education? It should be the shield against this manipulation. But our schools teach obedience, not wisdom. They reward memorization, not imagination. You learn to follow rules, not to question systems. From the moment you enter the classroom to the moment you clock into work, the script is written. Be useful. Be productive. Don't think too much. Even rebellion is now branded. T-shirts scream, revolution, made in sweatshops. Corporations post social justice slogans while exploiting workers behind the scenes. Activism has become a marketing aesthetic. This is how power survives in the modern world. Not through force, but through simulation. You feel like you're making choices. You feel like your voice matters. You feel like you're free. But deep down, you know, something is off. You're tired, but you don't know why. You're surrounded, but you feel alone. You're connected, but nothing feels real. And so we scroll, and scroll, and scroll. Marx never lived to see TikTok, Instagram, or Amazon Prime. But his warning echoes louder than ever. When profit is the god of the system, humanity becomes the sacrifice. So now we must ask, are we living in an age of freedom, or just a prettier prison, run by code and controlled by capital? So here we are, surrounded by lights, fed by content, sedated by comfort. We believe we are free because the cage is invisible, because the walls are made of pixels, passwords, and promises. But freedom, true freedom, is not the absence of chains. It is the presence of consciousness. Karl Marx did not give us all the answers, but he gave us something far more dangerous to those in power. The right question: who benefits from the way the world is? He warned us not just of capitalism's mechanics, but of its illusions, how it hides exploitation behind convenience, how it sells obedience as empowerment, how it trains you to love your cage. And maybe that's the most terrifying truth of all. We are not just being controlled. We are complicit. We trade time for money, truth for comfort, depth for dopamine. We no longer need to be silenced. We've been trained not to listen. But the moment you begin to see, not just what is, but what could be, you break the spell. You crack the illusion. And that is where freedom begins. Not in comfort, not in applause, but in the lonely, powerful act of waking up. So ask yourself, are you truly free or just compliant in prettier chains? Have you chosen your life or was it chosen for you? Sold back in high definition?